Hello there, I hope you are doing well. This day I would like to look at Genesis. Well, there'll probably be a couple chapters. The thing is, I'm quite behind from where I'm reading. I'm done Genesis, but with my videos, I'm way behind. So I think we're going to fast track some of the things. In chapter 40 and 41, we see that the Lord was still with Joseph. He went to prison and the Lord gave him favor with the warden and actually was put in charge of like the prison. He was still a prisoner, but he was put in charge of it. And you know the story of the baker and the cupbearer who they both were thrown in prison and they had dreams, and one dream was favorable and one was not. And Joseph asks the cupbearer, who was going to be restored back to power, not to forget him. But it says he forgot him. I mean, in the cupbearer's defense, in a way, you would not want to remind the Pharaoh of a past grievance that he would have had with you, you know. And I mean, he was just happy to have made it out alive, whereas the baker, he was hung, he was killed. So it's a time of his life that he would rather forget rather than to remember. But God would use the cupbearer later on when Pharaoh has his own dreams to think up again of his past, so that Joseph would then be set free. So anyways, I kind of want to look at, Pharaoh has his dreams, and he has a dream of, the seven lean cows and fat cows, and then the ears of grain, I believe, 7 and 7. And we see here, and this is kind of what I want to look at here, in verses 42 of chapter 41, even a little before, he gives his interpretation of the dream. And yes, I'm skipping over some things, I know. I'm just trying to catch up. Pharaoh takes off his ring in verse 42 from his hand, and he puts it in the hand of Joseph, and he clothed him with fine linen robes, and he put a golden chain on his neck. So this is the third robe that Joseph is given. We see, the first one he was given in Genesis 37. And, that coat of many covers. It was like a kind of, it almost, to me, seems like there was these three robes kind of symbolize the 3 seasons of Joseph's life. The first one, the second one was, and I talk about these in my videos, you can look at them. This one here is kind of a robe of wealth, power, and favor. And this robe is not, it's almost like God has taken Joseph through so much training. And actually, Joseph, one of the things that I believe that is very crucial and important that we could miss is that Joseph himself had to learn to forgive even Potiphar. Now he and his wife, right? He was now being put in second in command of all of Egypt. And only under Pharaoh, and he had a lot of power. He could have went back and gotten even. But God has worked in, whenever God works in our lives, and whenever we face certain things, we never really see exactly what God is doing while we are in the process of his refinement, and he chips away at us, and he molds us into the people that he wants us to be. And we see that Joseph, he could have gotten even here. Now he was put into a place of power. And he could have taken a Potiphar and his wife and had him killed, for whatever reason, that he would want it. He had that power. But we see that a man of God, whenever God, molds us, and whenever we are changed by him, we learn to do things through his power. So like Joseph would have forgiven Potiphar, like would not have done what he could have done to him and his wife, even though they meant it for evil. He says that later on to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And we see that here. I think God had trained him and had brought him through all these difficult times because God was teaching him very important lessons through it all. And I mean, you can go through this and look through some of the things that he went through and some of the things he was preparing him for. He always put him in position of leadership wherever he was, and it started small. It started he was a slave, and he was put in a leadership position in the house, he was over everything. Then God put him in a prison. And that was even lower, but I think it probably would have even been more responsibility, with all the prisoners and everything that went on there. But God put him again in a leadership position in that, and he had to learn to put aside his personal, it was not about him. It was, he was a slave, he was a prisoner, it was not about him. And now he gets put into this position of overall power in all of Egypt. And again, I believe he has learned that it is not about him. It's about God. It's about the bigger picture. God has a plan. He has a purpose. I mean, if Joseph was thrust into leadership position over all of Egypt, at a young age, without going through all these things he went through, he would have never been the leader that he was now. I mean, God taught him so many things through this, and God was the only thing that he could cling on to through his difficult trial and trouble, that he realized, listen, I am only alive because God is with me. And this is not about me, it's about God. And so, we see Joseph at age 30. It says in verses 46 here, it says, and Joseph was a son of 30 years as he stood before Pharaoh. And he left at 17. Now he's 30. That's 13 years now that he has been already away from his family. And the 7 good years get tagged onto that. So that's 37. And then it says the second year in the famine is kind of, when his brothers start showing up. So he would have been 39 years old once his siblings begin to show up. So that's a long time not seeing your siblings. I mean, that's, I think 21 years, 22 years he was in Egypt. So he was 17 with his father, and then he was there like 21 or 22 years without seeing his family at all. And then he sees his family. And there's some more interesting things I want to touch on with his age and the numbers there. I think there's some interesting stuff. God is very specific and very detailed. I mean, I could mention it now. Later on, when you read this story, it says in Genesis, I think it's like 49, it talks about Jacob there. It says in Genesis 47, actually, not 49. It says in verses 28, Genesis 47, and Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So, think about it. It's like, wow, like Joseph was 17 years old when he was taken from Jacob. God allows Jacob to have another 17 years with him. I mean, when I read that, I was just like, wow, like God is so good. Like the number of years, So I wrote it up here. He was 17 years when he sold. He was 30 when he became the second in command. Then there were 7 years of plenty, so he was 37. And in 2 years of famine, he sees his brothers. So he was 39 when he saw his father. And so he was 22 years when he didn't see his father, and God gave him another 17 years. So Joseph was 56 years old when his father died. Just to give you a little bit of the ages, it's more interesting than anything else. Because you miss some of these 7 years, and we actually miss how long that Joseph was separated from his brothers and his family, and how long God, God always was with Joseph and always knew where Joseph was, but Jacob didn't, and sometimes I wonder, because God tells Jacob when he comes to Egypt, he says, "Go, your son Joseph is there and will take care of you." And my initial thought is like, God, why didn't you tell me he was alive? Like you knew all along. But that's why God is God and we are not. And I mean, that's why too, he can see, because you see that the spirit of Jacob, it says, was revived when he found out, and that's why, when the word of God says that we need to trust him, we do need to trust him, because he knows so much more than we ever will, and he plays all the angles, and he knows everything. And so then when we come into a place where it's difficult, we need to trust that he knows, and we need to look back on even stories like this, and even things, maybe if you journal in your life where God has led you through very difficult and hard times, you can go back to that and say, God brought it all together. Even though it was very difficult, very hard, God had a purpose in this, and so, yeah, I just encourage you to I'm jumping around a little bit, but I find it amazing now as the story unfolds with his brothers, when they come to Egypt, and how Joseph handles this. This is just incredible and amazing, and I do want to make a video about that.